Hi, good evening. I'm going to let people settle down a little bit. We've got about 450, 460 people here already. And it takes a while for the people coming in from the Unity website. Good, at least somebody hears some voices. Now today's going to be a bit mild. I'm going to do some more hardcore UI sessions later on in the calendar. I haven't scheduled them yet, but I wanted to sort of get started and sort of take a look at the UI. I've repurposed Nightmares, which is the special training day session that was made by James Buckley on our team, and Pete, who's not here tonight. Neither of them are here tonight, unfortunately, who made this for our training day, a very successful training day at Unite. And if you want to know where to get it, where to get the base, we can find that from the Asset Store. And the Asset Store is Command 9, Control 9 are the Windows here, Windows menu, and looking for the Asset Store. And if we go up on the Asset Store, it's on the top somewhere. It's quite popular right now. There it is, Nightmares Unite Training Day 2014. And you can download that. We can also get the slides from the training day, so you can see the slides from the session if you want to. And then the session was recorded, so you can get that on our website. So we're dealing with a slightly modified version of Nightmares. I have removed some of the UI for it. I've left some stuff. I've left the score. I've left a flashing screen when you get hurt. And I don't really need to rebuild those because those you can see on the videos that we have on the site already. I'm just going to try to push forward and doing some new things. I'm going to do a quick different HUD than what was already here. I'm going to do a pause menu, and then if we have time, I'm going to go ahead and get into some slightly higher, more interesting detail. We have the HUD canvas. So this is a modified version of Nightmares level 1. And I have taken the HUD canvas and I have removed some items from it. Let me just bring this up. And then working in 2D. When you're working with the UI, work in 2D mode. Much easier than working in 3D mode. And then what we're looking at here is our canvas. The canvas is the basis of everything that we're going to be doing with the new UI tools. Now you can have multiple canvases. We cover canvases on the website in module form. We have each one of these components is going to be broken down in module form under the UI tools. So I'm not going to go into great detail about any of these specifically as a component level. So we've got our canvas. Canvas is we're going to start with. Everything is going to be on a canvas. We can have multiple canvases. This is a canvas that was built for the Nightmares project, and I have removed good portions of it. I've left only a screen fader. I have left the game over text, and I've left the score, and I've left a little damage image which just flashes red when when we take damage. So if we take a look at the canvas, we can see that we also have a new rect transform, and all of the items that are on our canvas have a rect transform. And the rect transform is a replacement of the transform. It has more information. It's for defining a rect rather than defining an object in 3D space. When we look at our game objects in 3D space, our transforms have position and rotation and scale, whereas our rect transform defines a rect with a left and right, and top and bottom. We also have a position Z, and we have anchors, and we'll go ahead and see that in action a little bit further on. And then we still do have rotation and scale, so we can go ahead and manipulate that in 3D space. So what I'd like to do is build a little bit more dynamic HUD for our little guy down here. So we've got our little player character. So let's zoom in on our player character. Zoop. I'm going to go back at it into 3D space, so we can go ahead and take a look at our player. And I have a little icon for him. And I've brought in these demo art textures. And when we bring in our textures, they're going to come in when we're in 3D mode, because we've got a 3D game here. We're not making a 2D game. If we were making a 2D game and we were in 2D mode and our editor was in 2D mode, then all of the artwork that we bring in would come in as a sprite. But we are dealing with a 3D game here, and we want our 2D heads-up display to go on top of that, to go on our canvas. So all of the artwork that we've brought in, let me bring these open. All of our little artworks that we have brought in are going to come in as textures. So these need to be converted as a texture type. We need to have a texture type to be texture type sprite. And we can see that's for the 2D and the UI. So when we're done changing those over, and this is, I can do this by bulk. I can select all of them and change them all at once and hit apply. I'm going to go ahead and leave my sprite mode as single, because each one of these are perfectly fine the way that they are. I don't need multiple, so we're not going to look at sprite mode, and we're not going to look at the sprite editor at this time. So now I've got my artwork. What I want to do is take a character icon of our little player here and put it up in the corner, up in the upper left-hand corner. So let's go ahead and click on our canvas, and let's go ahead and create a new UI image. And that'll give us a little image there, and we can grab our icon player, put that into the source image, woohoo, and there we've got our little icon for our player. Now, if we go ahead and double-click it or hit F, frame selected, we can see that it's way out here, and our canvas, compared to our game, is huge. There's a little game down here, and here's our canvas. And the reason for that is we want to be able to deal on our canvas easily in easy units, and by having it this big, we can have 1 pixel per unit on our canvas. And so that when we're manipulating our units over here in our rect transform, we can be manipulating those in pixels. So I'm going to go back into 2D mode since I'm dealing with my canvas. And now the next thing I want to do is I want to drag this guy up into the corner. And I could do that manually, dragging it out, and you can see we've got our little helper gizmos here telling us where we've moved from our anchor points. But it's a lot easier to go ahead and change our alignment with our anchor presets. So I'm going to grab our anchor presets, and I want to align into the upper left. And so I want to set the pivot, and I also want to set the position. So I can sit down and show the Shift key. Shift key will set the pivot, and you can see that the pivot icon shows up. And then Alt key will also set the position. So setting the pivot, setting the position, and then click in the upper left, and it goes bang to the upper left. And we can see that our anchor points are in the upper left as well. So what I want to do with this little guy is I also want to move his health bar, and I want to move an ammo bar up next to him. So I'm going to use a slider for this. To go ahead and use a slider, I'm going to click on the canvas. And one thing that's really nice about the UI system is that we can use our contextual click, and it will make it a child. So if I have it selected as the HUD canvas here, and I create a UI slider, that UI slider will be made as a child of the HUD canvas. Now I'm going to undo that. If for some reason I wanted it a child of another game object, select that game object, and you can see it was made a child of that game object. I'm going to undo that as well and go back to assigning it to my HUD canvas. Now, let's zoom in on that. We've got a slider here. A slider is made out of a number of different elements because we're dealing with a retained UI. So we have sprites, 2D sprites for every one of these layers. We've got a fill area, a fill, we've got our handle area and our handle. Now I'm going to be repurposing this slider to essentially be a display of our current health. So I don't need the handle slide. I don't need the handle or the handle slide area. So I can just simply delete that. And that's going to leave us just the slider itself. It'll continue to function fine. Even if we wanted to use this as a slider, we don't need the handle. That is an option. So at this point, I'm going to simply delete it. And then I want to change that fill and give it a different color. I want to give that the color of red. So I now have a red health bar. When dealing with the slider itself, the other thing we want to do is set its value. And we also want to make this non-interactable. So the two things I want to set on the slider component is the interactable button and the value. So the max value, our character has 100 health, so I want to make sure that my slider goes from 0 to 100. I don't need to worry about whole numbers because that'll be something that I will push to it with my script. And then let's go ahead and set that value all the way up to 100 because that's what we're going to start with. Now, to a certain degree, the value will be set by the script when we start it, so that's not important, that's not necessary, but it looks better that we've got, for me it looks better that I've got my, my slider all the way up there to maximum when I start my game. So again, now I want to move this. Again, I could just pick it up and I could move it. But my anchor point is there in the center. I want to anchor this up in the upper left. So let's go ahead and again use our anchor presets, hold down the Shift and the Alt key, and pop that to the center, or pop it from the center into the upper left. So pop it to the upper left, and then go to frame selected, and then I'm going to pull it down and just set it by eye to something that I find comfortable. I'm going to snap it to the edge of the icon. You can see that it's snapping to that edge of the player character icon, and then pull it down I don't know, let's say 25. I'll make that a nice even 25. 25 units and 25 pixels. Now, it's important here that we have our interactable set to false, because we want to send a value to this slider. If we were able to make this interactable, we could also set our health back, because this is a UI element, this is a slider element. We could use it as a setting. So if our health went down, if we wanted more health, we can simply slide the slider back up again and put ourselves back to max health. But we do not want to interact with this slider, so we want to make sure that our interactable is set to false. And this is going to be set by the player script. So let's go ahead and look at the player. Now, this player script was already written. The player health script was part of the original project. So let's go ahead and open this up and take a look at what we're going to be doing. We're going to be adding this to the health slider. And if we just take a look at the script, there are only two instances of this, two uses of this in this script. And essentially, when the game decides to take damage, it will set the health slider value to our current health. And our current health is just a value of 1 to 100. So we've got the slider will simply just display it. So when our character takes damage, it'll be set by saying health slider.value is set to the current health. So let's come back to Unity, and what we need to do is just simply apply that health slider here to the health slider slot. So let's go ahead and grab our health slider, which we've made. It's called slider. Let's go ahead and make that our health slider. So health slider, give it a name, and then give it to our player. Move that health slider into the slot. Now let's save that. So I also want to go ahead and do something very similar, but I want to use this to keep track of, I don't know, bullets. I want to keep track of mana. I want to keep track of any of the other things that you can keep track of when you do a game, any particular game that needs a slider. So I'm going to go ahead and duplicate this. I'm going to go ahead and pick our element, make sure that I've got the root here, health slider, duplicate that. And let's call this one our ammo slider. And we'll use this to keep track of how many shots that we have on our gun. So let me go ahead and duplicate that, and then let's just grab that and pull that down. And you can see that we're snapping. I'm snapping to both the side of the player here, and I'm getting a distance from my anchors, from the pivot point, which you can see. Snap that up just a little bit more. And then let's change the color of our fill to something different. Let's just say something simple, cyan or something like that. How about that? Nice little cyan color. So now we need to go back and take a look at the player shooting script. There's a player shooting script that the player, let's go ahead and see if we can, this may error out because I've removed some things. We'll see, this should be fine. Yeah, so I've got a player shooting script here. But right now it shoots infinitely. So let's go ahead and limit the number of bullets we have and then use that to display in our UI. So let's go back to our player, and we can find the player shooting script here at the end of the gun barrel. So if we look at our gun barrel end, scroll down, we're going to find our player shooting script. So let's go ahead and open that for editing. Now, the first thing we need to do on this script is we're going to add, oh, you're not supposed to see that. I deleted that. Huh. So the very first thing we need to do is we're grabbing a brand new script, and this is just a simple mono behavior. It's using Unity Engine and nothing else. If we were to try to make this script use elements in the UI namespace, it wouldn't be able to find them. So we have to make sure that we are using the Unity Engine and UnityEngine.ui. And this will give us the namespace of all of the new UI tools so that we can go ahead and use them within our script. If we didn't have, I mean, obviously we didn't have that namespace, we'd be in trouble. We would start to write slider, which we're about to add in, and it wouldn't be able to find it. So let's go ahead and add some new variables. Let's add a public. We want a slider, and this is going to be a reference to the ammo slider we've just written. And then let's call this one ammo slider. We also want to have a public, let me zoom in for this on you guys so you can see that. It's always silly to do. There we go. Might be a little bit easier. So let's make this a public int, and let's call this one max bullets. How about max bullets? And then a private int. And that would be our current bullets. So we've got our max bullets, we've got our current bullets, and we have our slider, our ammo slider. So in awake, we obviously want to take our, let's back up here so we can start to see them. We want to take our current bullets, needs to be equal to our max bullets. So we're going to do that at the start so that we can set up how many bullets that we have. And then in shoot, and I know that there's a large script here, and this is all about how this particular game works, but I just want to deal with just the UI so we can drill down to just the specifics that we need. So when the player pulls the trigger, it calls shoot. Ultimately, this function shoot is called by the player every time he puts down, pulls that main mouse button. And when we shoot, I'm going to back out just a second here. I know it's big for you guys, but it's a little bit too big for me. So there's our shoot. And so if we have run out of bullets, I'm going to do this after the timer, after the reset timer, if we've run out of bullets. So if our current bullets is going to be less than or equal to 0, we simply want to return. We just, we don't want to deal with this. We don't want to fire anything. So if we're out of bullets, we can't fire. Nothing happens. And then if we are not out of bullets, we want to say our current bullets is less 1. So minus equals 1. So we take 1 out of our cache of bullets there. And then when we shoot, if there is an enemy, the enemy takes damage. I'm jumping ahead. I can just do this right here. Sorry, never mind. Ignore that. I was jumping ahead. So I can do that here. We can say our ammo slider dot value is going to be equal to our bullet count. So we can do this all right here. Sorry about that. I've nope, not max bullet. Bullet count, please. Current bullets. And so here, if we've run out of bullets, we stop, we return. If we still have bullets, we subtract 1, and we reset our bullet display. So let's go back, save this, and go back to Unity. And in Unity, we just now need to assign, once it compiles, I'm using up all my CPU time to broadcast to you guys. I find that when I'm doing my recording and broadcasting to you, I eat up about 90% of my CPU, unfortunately, right now. So there we go. So now we've got our max bullets. Our max bullets, let's say, is 100, because we've got that slider set for 100. And then let's go ahead and grab our ammo slider. We can save that. And now let's go ahead and play. And we can see that we've got our bullets scored down here. And now, you can see as I fire, very soon I'm going to regret having wasted my bullets. Anyway, so we can now see how quickly we've just hooked up a health slider and how quickly we've hooked up a bullet slider. We can go into our script. We can simply grab that slider's value, and assign it to anything that we want, and it's displayed. So within minutes, we have something on our screen. So, Tixowie, what is that return good for in a void? Why not if else? In one sense, I'm just trying to not completely rip open that script. I could have easily said, if I still have bullets, then do all of the rest of this particular script. But it actually becomes more editing. So it's easier for me to throw in one line. And in Unity, if you have a void and you return, essentially you're handing the control back to wherever Unity was in the game loop. So it calls that function, and then ultimately Unity is going to keep going. And so the function returns void, but if you return, we aren't returning anything. We're returning null. Unity, you're basically returning control back to Unity, and Unity sort of picks up wherever it left off, if that makes sense. So let's go ahead and add a UI. So when we attack our enemies, I'm going to put in an enemy just so it's a little bit closer for what we're doing. So I'm going to go and, just so you know what I'm doing, I'm going to go to our, where there's a enemy controller, event, enemy manager. And I'm going to click on one of these guys, Zombunny. So there's our prefab. So let's give him somebody to shoot at. Let me, it'll be easier to pop that there. And then grab the Zombunny, frame selected, go back into 3D mode, and then go ahead and move the little guy around. So we've got someone to attack a little bit easier. So let's save that. So I've got a Zombunny, and you can see now that he's close, he's going to come right at us. Let me hit play. Somebody to kill really easy. So that'll help us with our testing. And we can disable him when we want to get rid of him. So what I want to do is be able to see the health of the enemy that I'm attacking. And I'm going to do this right now in the overlay HUD. And I also want to pop up a picture of the enemy when we attack him. So the first thing I want to do is take a look at my enemy here. And he's got an enemy health script on him. And then let's go ahead and edit that script. And what I want to do is add an icon to the enemy as part of the enemy health script. So I'm going to add a public. I'm going to add a public sprite, and I'm going to call this icon. Then save this and return to Unity. So now we can see that the enemy health script, when it compiles, we now have our icon that we can assign. And if we go to the prefabs down here, we can see that all of those have icons as well. So we have icons for them. Let me pop this up. We've got our little elephant icon. We've got our icon placeholder, which I'll show you how I'm going to use in a moment. We've seen our player icon. There is our Zombear and our Zombunny. So let's go ahead and grab that Zombunny, and let's add the Zombunny icon. Oops, let's just close that down. There we go. Zombunny icon. So Zombear, he gets the Zombear icon. And then our Elephant, oops, good morning. Our Elephant gets our Elephant icon. Come on, scoot down. So there's our Elephant icon. So now all of these have their icons attached, and we now can see our icon there. And so when we shoot our enemy, we're going to reach out and grab those. So let's go ahead and go back to that player script, our player shooting script. So this is the player shooting script, and this is the script that will detect the enemy that we're shooting. So let's go ahead to the top and add some more variables. Let's add a, just put this in my public. I like to keep my publics and privates together. Let's make a public image, and this is going to be our enemy image. And then in shoot, so when we shoot at our enemy, so here we go. When we shoot at our enemy, this is where I jumped ahead. So we shoot at our enemy, and then lots of special effects and all sorts of things. We shoot out a ray, and that ray goes out and touches the enemy, and it finds that enemy health script. And so if it's an enemy, it will have an enemy health script, and we send it take damage. And we're going to use this to do something else, slightly more clever here. We're going to say the enemy image, because the enemy image is going to be a sprite that we place in the game world and be part of our UI. And we're going to say it's enabled. We want it to be enabled. Its enabled state is going to be true. We want to make sure that our image is enabled. And then we also want to say our enemy image, its sprite, is going to be equal to the enemy health that we've just found, its icon. So we're grabbing the image from the enemy that we've hit. And then after we've grabbed the image, what we want to say is, here is else. If the enemy script is null, if we don't have an enemy health script on our enemy, then it's not an enemy. It's a bit of the scenery. We've hit part of the set, or we've hit nothing. So then what we want to do here is say our enemy image dot enabled is false. So this says we haven't hit anything. Let's just turn it off. And just for safety's sake, though we will turn off the image in the editor, let's guarantee that by putting this up here in a wag. so that if we leave that enemy image on, as a matter of fact, why don't we leave it on so we can use it as a placeholder? And so this script will turn it off automatically before the game starts there on that very first frame. So let's come back to Unity and let's make this icon. So let's take this player icon. So let's go to our HUD canvas, and then let's go to is that our image? Which one is that? Oh, silly me. Let's name this our player icon. Forgot to rename that. So let's duplicate that, and then let's call this our enemy icon. And again, we can quickly snap it to the other corner by just holding down the Shift and Alt keys, and poof, it's now gone into the other corner. And I'm going to go ahead and use this icon placeholder for that icon image. This will be replaced by whatever enemy that we hit. But we want to see it up there. And so I've put this big question mark on top of it so that we know that that's a temp placeholder. That is for us, for editing purposes. During the game, the image script will be disabled unless we hit something and we'll grab that image. So now that we've got that image, let's also duplicate the player health slider. So we've got the health slider here, duplicate that. And let's rename this to enemy health slider. Let's just add the enemy at the front. So we've got our enemy health slider there. And same thing, snap it over onto the other side. If we look at our health slider, we're at 125. So let's just do this at minus 125. So that's in the exact opposite place. So I'm just grabbing that and moving that numerically. Now we need to find a way of actually changing the values on this enemy health. So we need to be able to grab the enemy health and apply that enemy health value to this particular slider. And because we copied it, don't forget that we also have interactable false, so that we don't have any interaction going on to our slider, and that we also have our max value set to 100. So coming back to our script editor and looking at our player shooter script, we now need to have a reference to this particular object. So we need to have public slider, and we want our enemy health slider. Only if I can spell. Enemy health slider. Okay, so there's our enemy health slider. Now we have a bit of an issue here, which when we're dealing with the image, when we're dealing with this enemy image that we have here, we make sure that that enemy image is enabled. And looking at the enemy icon, there's the enemy icon, we can simply disable that image script and it goes away. But if we do that to the enemy health slider, that's not necessarily true, because there's our image script. This is the image that we have of the background. We make that disabled and we still have the slider. And this is because we have now a family of game objects. With the enemy icon, we have a single game object with a single important component. We can disable the image, it goes away. So we're going to have to deal with the game object itself, and we're going to have to set a game object inactive so it takes all of the children with it. So we need an additional step here. And part of that is not only making a new reference, but also finding a way to populate it. So we've now taken our public slider, we need a private game object. And that game object will be our enemy health object. So that's our enemy health object. That's the game object that will be the parent of that enemy health slider. Or actually, it'll be the game object that the enemy health slider component resides on. So in Awake, we're now going to have to set that, our enemy health object. So our enemy health object is going to be equal to our enemy health slider dot game object. So we're taking the game object of the enemy health slider. And when we shoot our enemy, down here, down in shoot, we need to make sure that that game object is active. So unlike simply taking the image and making sure it's enabled, we want to now take our enemy health object and we want to set active true. And once it's true, once it's set active, we can take our enemy health slider and do the same thing and just say our enemy health slider dot value is equal. I don't like. Okay, there we go. Sorry, I had a moment of doubt there when my code completion gave me the red underline. So the value of that enemy health slider is going to be equal to our enemy health script. Only if I spell it right, enemy health script. And then inside that enemy health script, we luckily have a wonderful thing called current health. So I can just go ahead and grab that directly. And coincidentally, our bad guys also have 100 health as a full health bar. And then, like we did with the image down here, if we haven't hit anything, we want to take that enemy health object and we want to set active. And we want to set active false. And again, just to make sure that we do this nice and clean, let's copy that and paste that up here in a wake at the top so that we find that enemy health object and then we make sure that it's set to false. So let's save this and let's come back to Unity. Let's take a look at our player shooting. Player script. Player shooting is at the end of the gun barrel. And we need to now populate our enemy icon into our enemy image there, and our enemy health slider there to our enemy health slider. So let's save that. And then let's go ahead and play. All right, so we've got our little guy up here, and when we hit play, first thing we should do is see that enemy should all just go blank. And then when we shoot the guy, we can see him appear, and we can see his health bar go down. There's a bad guy, and we can pop around, shoot a couple at this guy, back off, shoot one at this new target, and we can see that we are picking our icons, getting them from our enemies, putting them into the screen, and we're giving ourselves a health bar. So next I want to quickly take a look at creating a paused option menu. And so we need a button that's going to go ahead and call our paused option menu, and we're going to need a script that's going to go ahead and pause our game. Now, conveniently, the folks in the Learn team made me one. So if we go ahead and look at our demo script, I'm going to go ahead and take a look at this pause manager. The pause manager that we have here, and if we're not familiar with these are if definitions. And we've got these in a couple of places for this particular script because we want to, the behavior has to be slightly different in this script if we are running our game or if we are in the editor. So what we say here at the top is if we are using the Unity editor, and there are some pages on this in the documentation, then we also want to have the namespace of Unity editor, and then we end that if statement. And then inside the script, if we are using the Unity editor, when we quit, we just want to stop playing. Or else, if we are running a standalone game, we want to quit the game. And so essentially the bulk of this script grabs a canvas and then has a reference for a canvas, and then we grab the canvas and we'll put this on the canvas itself. And then it will, again, out of convenience, disable that canvas for us. And then in update, it's going to look to see if we press the escape key. And if we press the escape key, it's going to call the pause function, and the pause function will enable the canvas, so turn on our sprites, and well, actually, it will toggle the enabled state. So if it's on, it'll become off. If it's off, it's going to become on. And it will also do that with the time scale. So it's going to toggle the time scale between 1 and 0. So 0, our game will be paused. 1, our game will act normally. And then finally, there is a public function here for quitting. Now, the reason that these are written this way and the reason that these are public is so we can access them with a button. And when we access things with a button, and there's more detail on this in the button component script that we have on the Learn site, but essentially it needs to be a public function, it has to have a return type of void, and it has to either have no parameters or one parameter. And those parameters are limited to something like float, int, bool, string, and object. But the nice thing about it, object is the base of so many things in Unity. It essentially means that you can pass quite a large variety of objects into a function that's being used by the UI system. So coming back to Unity, first thing I want to do is create a button. I'm going to create the button that's going to pause the game, and then I'll go ahead and set up that paused menu. So when creating a button, so let's create a new button and let's put it on our HUD canvas because we want this to be on our standard canvas. Let's just create a new UI button, and we get a little default button. I'm going to go back into 2D mode, and then I'm going to double click on our canvas so we get the whole thing here as well. The top as well. Oh, fuss. Come on. There we go. So little default button. All of the buttons come with a default background graphic. They're usually a light gray and a simple Arial text. And if we look at the button again, it is made up of two elements. We've got the button background graphic, and then we have the text on top. And the text on top is optional. So if you wanted to have a fully painted button, or you wanted to use graphics instead, you can get rid of the text, and the button will still continue to work. That is just simply a label. And in this particular case, I want to reuse the button background, and I want to add our graphic to it. So the first thing I want to do is make it square. So let's just make this roughly, we can reposition this, let's try 75 by 75. So, ooh, that's not right. There we go. And I'm going to replace the texture with a texture that I have been given from our wonderful art department. So I'm going to use UI button default and just change that out on the image script. And you're not changing it on the target graphic here. The target graphic is looking at this image script. And so this image script is what we need for our button. And then I want to add an image on top of that. So I make sure it's selected in the hierarchy, right click, and then add a UI image. And right now it's going to be much bigger. And then I'm going to go ahead and add in the demo art, our icon gear into that image. And then let's just call this gear image. So there's our gear image. Kind of not working. And that's because right now it's just centered on top of the button. And so if we look at our anchors, we can zoom in. It's anchored. It's anchored there in the middle of the button, but our button is smaller than our image. So the first thing I'm going to do is I'm going to grab our presets button, and I'm going to get it to stretch to fit. And again, I'm going to just make sure it's positioned correctly and pivoted correctly and pop it there in the middle. Still not perfect. It's a bit too big still, even though it's exactly the same size as the parent button. So what we need to start working here is our anchors and our pivots, because right now it's anchored directly to that corner. But I want the image to be slightly smaller than the anchor itself. And we can go ahead and just drag that in and make that slightly smaller if we wanted to, until it was inside the image the way we wanted. You know, just do it by hand. Or we can set it up here by grabbing it numerically by looking at the left, right, top, and bottom. And these essentially become a pad. It's the amount of distance between the anchor on that side and the sprite itself. So you can see as I move this, this is now 6 pixels from the left. If I wanted to go to the top, I could make it 6 pixels all the way around. Starting to look a little better. This particular artwork, however, has the shadow that is cast down in the lower right. So we kind of want to have this offset a little bit. So I'm going to make it a little bit bigger on the left and the top and a little bit smaller on the right and bottom. And this starts to look a little bit more centered. The other thing that we can do is we can preserve the aspect ratio, because one of the things that we have here is that there is a distance we've got between the anchor and our graphic. But if we were to grab the parent, because remember we're stretching to the parent, and change the parent, we change our graphic. And that isn't really what we want. So we can go ahead and also say preserve the aspect ratio, which would mean that it'll keep to the smallest side on that. I'm going to go ahead and return that back to a square button because a square button looks better. I am, however, going to set that preserve aspect ratio. Even though it happens to be right now, it's fine. It's probably a good thing to do. And if we wanted to change something, if we wanted to change the parent button, if the parent button's too big, let's go ahead and just move this down. Let's, again, snap it into the corner. Pow. Into the corner, a little bit too tight in there. Let's back it out a little bit. Bring it out, like, say, by 10 units, and then up by 10 units. Give it some breathing room. If it's too big, we can, make it smaller. 65 by 65. And you can see that that center icon is stretching back to fit, so it's going to stay nice and square in there. Yeah, right now I'm just noticing, picking up on a question, the question is that this particular project has no animated elements in it. No, we can animate those. It's just that the amount of time it takes to get that information across is a bit longer. We do cover animation in the components for button, and also there's a separate one on transitions, so you can look at animated transitions. So now that we've got our button needs to do something, but let's go ahead and hold off on what that button is doing, and let's create this paused screen. But what I want to do is create, and notice that I'm not selecting anything here except for the root. I want to create a new canvas. And I'm going to call this canvas the paused canvas. So we now have a new canvas. I'm going to do everything that we have for our pause menu is going to be on top of this new canvas. And so that means we can grab our script and we can put that onto the pause canvas. Because remember, that paused script is going to look for a canvas, that pause manager. And so it needs to be on a canvas, and so we're giving it its separate canvas. And in this canvas, I want to create a new panel. So I'm going to make sure that the canvas is selected and pick UI panel. And we can see that when panels are created, they're created to fill the entire canvas. Essentially, this is the same basic construction of an image. You can see that it's just a rect transform, a canvas renderer, and an image. So a panel is technically not different, but it's just a convenience for us to set it up this way because it becomes a large volume area, and then you can simply shrink it to fit. Whereas if it becomes an image, it becomes small, and you have to make it bigger, I suppose. It's your choice of whether you want to make one thing, the bigger thing smaller, or the smaller thing bigger. But what I want to do here is show you how you can quickly change the size of an element by manipulating its anchors. So if we look at the anchors here, and I hold down the shift key and make sure that we don't have it in rotate mode. You see, there's rotate mode, and this will rotate the element. I don't want to do that. I want to grab the anchor. You can see that we don't have the rotating icon. And if I move the anchor, it's just going to move where the anchor position is. But if I hold down the shift key, it moves the anchor and the outside of the sprite. So I can just pick, a smaller section for whatever size I would like to have for my panel. And to make sure it's centered, I can just click on this. You can see that it's custom. I can just go back to Shift and Alt and hit center, and now that's centered on the parent canvas. Again, let's update the default artwork. So looking at the panel, I'm going to go to my UI textures, and I want to go ahead and grab a UI panel. Boink. So now I have a little panel there on the background. Jack of D. Let me expand the question. Would you use different canvases to simulate windows on your UI, or would you use multiple game objects as a root of your window component? It would depend what you're wanting to do. In this particular case, because we have such a completely discrete set of items that are going to go on here, and we want it to manipulate the paused menu, it seems like a valid candidate for a canvas. There are multiple reasons for different canvases. One of the things I'd like to get in a future one, which I knew I wouldn't have time to get to it now, is applying, say, floating health bars on top of the characters. And one of the ways that you can do that is to make a little canvas that sits in world space, and so everyone would have their own canvas. So there are reasons for for wanting to have multiple canvases. Also, there's 3 different spaces that you can have a canvas. There's the screen space overlay, which is what we're working in. There is screen space camera, and then for overlay yet perspective, and then there is world space canvases. So there are many different reasons why you'd want to have different canvases. Just simply for new windows, you can often do that in the same canvas. We now have a panel, and let's go ahead and create some buttons. And again, we want to have them as children of the panel, so make sure that the panel is selected, and let's create a UI button. And that goes in as a child of that panel. And I want to make this one really big, sort of big, bold, fat button. So let's say 60 by 120, nice big fat button. And then let's go ahead and update all of the artwork. So again, we're coming back to the UI textures that I have here, and we'll make sure they're all available for you. And I'm going to take UI button default. And again, it goes on the image, not on the button script. And then for the text down here, it's another text object. So let's go ahead and do a number of changes. Let's change this to resume, because we're going to make 2 buttons, a quit and resume button. So this will be our resume button. And change the type style. Main assets, fonts, luckiest guy. So boop. And make it bigger, I don't know, 24, and then definitely let's change the color from some sort of dull gray. There we go, resume. So now I have a button that says resume, and I'm going to duplicate this button now. Let's make this the resume button. And then I'm going to duplicate that button, and it's going to become the quit button. So I've got 2 buttons. Simply want to throw that down in the corner. So put that down in one corner. Grab the quit button, which I have not changed the text on, which we should do. Make that quit. And then throw that down. Not the text. Stop that. Throw the the button level itself down into the corner. What clued me in is that I knew that the original button is not going to have stretch. Stretch is there for the text. But in the corner is a little bit too far, so let's back it out a little bit. So you can grab it. Oop, I've grabbed the text again. Click the quit button. Let's go ahead and drag that out, by some value. Make them even if you want. 15 by 15. Looks pretty good. Or you can just do it by, learn to type, 15 by 15. So we have our resume and our quit buttons. And now these buttons need to do something. I'm reading Cyber Google. Are you able to import fonts as is into Unity right now instead of making them an atlas? Yes, that's dealt with inside Unity. You can just simply bring in a true type font, and they are dynamic fonts. And so you can pick the type size, and it will be dealt with internally inside Unity. So we now have these buttons, and these buttons need to do something. So we will hook up, eventually we'll hook up that options button to open up this particular panel, but let's go ahead and deal with the resume and the quit buttons. The first place we need to look down here is in our on-click list. The on-click list will do, when we click the button, it will do everything in this on-click list. Now this on-click list is being handled by this event system. The event system was created when we created our first canvas. And if a canvas is created automatically inside the Unity system, it will create an event system. There are situations where you can manually create canvases on your own, and then you have to create your event system as well. But this event system is what's going to be handling all of the events. And for buttons, they have a default on-click list. If you want to do something other than simply click the button, you need to add a component, and then you can add additional, oops, we don't need that in there. If you look at events, you can add additional event triggers, but we won't be going into that today. Just know that they're there. So let's create a new row in our on-click list. And what do we want to do? We want to, in this case, resume. We want to pick up that pause function. Remember that pause function? We want to do this with a public void pause. And that's on the pause manager. And the pause manager is attached to our paused canvas. So we drag the game object. And we drag the game object into that first object slot. And we will have a list of all of the components that are on it, all of the scripts, including custom scripts like our pause manager, and then all of the accessible functions that are public, that are void, and have 0 or 1 argument. And we can see there's pause. And so there we go. We've added the pause manager. Same with quit. Let's repeat that. We add a line. Grab that paused canvas. Pause manager quit. That's done. So now let's go ahead and hook up our options button. So we're back into our original HUD canvas, and there's our button. Let's go ahead and call this our pause button or options button, whichever one you'd prefer. And again, we have everything set up except for our on-click. And our on-click in this case, again, is the paused button. And then we want it to pause the game. So let's save this. And remember, we don't need to have, we will throw this away, but we don't, not throw it away, but we will hide this. We don't have to, because it should do it automatically. The script on start should hide that. We can see that's hidden. That bangs. Quick pause. So we've paused our game. Now we could resume our game, or we could quit. And you can see in the short period of time that we've been here, we now have a pretty effective working HUD, especially with me having described some of this stuff. So let me do one more thing on this. So let me add 2 sliders, because what I want to do here is when you go into that options menu, you want to set some options. We've paused the game. We can use that to, you know, answer the phone call or whatever, but we can also use this to change some settings. So in our paused canvas, in our panel, let's add another one of our great UI sliders. But I want to use this as a slider. So what I want to do here is look at our handle and our fill area, and I want to replace the default graphics. So I've got, again, our UI textures. We've got our slider background. That's going to go into the image on the slider. Again, it's not going onto the slider script. We want to, in our fill, we want to use our UI slider fill. And then for our handle, we want to use our UI slider handle. And so we've now quickly made a quick UI slider there. Let's zoom in. I don't like its positioning. I want it to be wide. Let's have it stretch out all the way. And I can do this in a couple of ways. I can grab the width. And remember, when we're over the title, we can just simply stretch that back and forth with the mouse. So it's, remember, over the title, stretch back and forth. I'm undoing those. Or I can grab the sprite itself. And that's not even unless I hold down the Alt key. If I hold down the Alt key, it'll keep that pivot in the center and pull it out to the sides. So, and now notice if you can see the little orange bit underneath my cursor light up down here. I'll do that again. You can see that it's telling me I've snapped to that width. So I now have a slider that's all the way to the width, snap to the width. And I want to use a label now. And that label on our panel is going to be UI text. Again, let's swap out some of this stuff. What is it going to say? I'm going to use this to control the music volume. Now, we'll blast our heads off in a second. Music volume. So there's our music volume. Let's go ahead and change that to luckiest guy. And font size, I don't know, 24 I think is what we're dealing with. That looks good. And then let's get that into white. And I'm just going to stretch this out big enough so we can see music volume. So grab it, position it. Again, hook that up. It's snapping. So there's my music volume. Let's do 2 things. Let's do music volume and let's do effects volume, just because it looks kind of lonely there by itself. So I'm going to grab the slider and the text. Let's name this to music volume slider. And then music volume label. And then I'm going to grab this, I'm going to duplicate it, and now I've got 2. Quickly again, changing this to FX volume label and FX volume slider. I'm going to select them both and move them up. Now, again, look at that. We're a little bit sloppy, but I want it to be even, going straight up. Hold the Shift key, and we're now snapping, going up only on one axis. So let's move that up. And let's change that here to FX. Volume. Hooking these up so they do something is very similar to the way that we hooked up the button. And we can hook these up to custom functions that we've made. But it's a little bit tricky when it comes to how do we get the actual value of the slider out and onto whatever function, or either built-in or custom function that we have inside our game. So let's go ahead and take a look at the sliders a little bit more carefully. I was going to rearrange these just so that we're the same. Let's just pull that one down here. There we go. Oh, not inside. Silly thing. There we go. So our labels are on top of our sliders. Looking at the music volume slider, again, we've got an on value changed list. I'm going to create a new row here. And this event is called when the value of the slider changes. And then it calls this event. Now, what do I want to change? In this case, it's the background music. So let's go ahead and just drag that background music object onto the object slot. Looking at the background music, it is simply a game object with an audio source, and that audio source has the looping background music. But I don't need to write any special function, because if we look inside the components, we can see there's the game object, there's the transform, and there's the audio source. Looking back at the game object, there's our game object, there's our transform, there's our audio source. So I can pick the audio source, and coming up to dynamic float, not static parameters, and I'll explain this in a second. I want to send the dynamic float. I want to send the current value of this slider to the volume. And there's the volume exposed inside Unity. So that's Unity's, we haven't written anything custom. That's the volume from the background music volume right here. So let's come back to our slider, so we can simply set it. If we want to set a single value, we can put that into the parameter list. We could set a static parameter, and we could put a value in here, but it wouldn't help in this particular case because we want the dynamic float. We want the number that changes between 0 and 1. We don't want to continually send whatever value we type in by hand here in the inspector. So again, same thing. Our volume slider. What we want is at the end of the player is the gun barrel, and in the gun barrel is another audio source. So our effects slider, gun barrel end. Oops, well, let's go back to the effects slider. Let's get a row there. So there's our row, gun barrel end, and then we have our I got the wrong thing. Got the zombunny. Try the gun barrel end this time. Gun barrel end, and there's the audio source, dynamic float, volume. Now, this isn't being saved to player prefs or anything like that. So when we play the game, every time we play it, it's going to be reset back to whatever the default value is. Sorry, hands off the keyboard there. So hopefully you can see the difference that we have now in the effects volume. So you can see we can quickly hook up those. All right. I don't want to die. I'm going to pause the game and stay here forever. So quit. There you go, UI. So that's what I have scheduled for tonight. Let me open this up for questions. So picture me rolling. Adam, I believe the new UI doesn't work for an own editor window. I want to to create something like the animator so I can drag around states. I tried to use this using GUI.Windows, but it seems like GUI.Windows is only working in the game view. Yes, the original on GUI immediate mode UI, picture me rolling, is what you would use to do your in-editor UIs. And you can do everything that you see in Mechanim. Everything that's done in Mechanim is done in Unity's on GUI in the editor. It's not going to be really easy to show in the context here. What I would suggest that you do is post on the forum or answers, and I will get you those resources, because if you can make Bezier curves, you can connect nodes together, all of that can be done in Unity's on GUI. Gegabel. Do I need to store slider value in a float to use serializable? Are you talking about if you're wanting to save that value, say during a save point? Well, then yes, you will need to store that. You'll need to store that in your own float, because the value, I mean, you will be able to pass that value through when the on value changed is triggered, when the event is triggered. But beyond that, you should store that in your own float. Xphlox, is the new UI safe for mobile apps? Yes, they are. And if you look at the event system, you can see that there's an event system, and we can also do standalone input and touch input already built in. Perchik 3. Question: if I needed to access the same menu from multiple scenes, do I need to have a canvas prefab to load at runtime? I.e. every level would want to open the configuration menu, change volume. You could do that in two ways. You could use that as a prefab that you could then load up, or you could persist that over scenes using do not destroy on load. So if you look up do not destroy or don't destroy on load, makes me want to now check it just to make sure. Is it don't or do not? I think it's don't destroy. Or is it do not? Don't destroy on load. That's it. So you could carry that menu over, or you could instantiate that each scene from a prefab. Fisher. Is there some evil traps if you want to dynamically instantiate a UI prefab at runtime? For example, when you want a dynamic list with lines made out of prefabs or an inventory kind of thing. There aren't any evil traps that I know of yet. So far, my experimentations have shown to be relatively straightforward, but I haven't completed any of my tests. So again, that's a bit of a watch this space, and also look for more tutorials as they come up on the Learn site. Freud Bill 42. Is there something like Atlas Maker in NGUI for this? Yes, there is a sprite packer. As a matter of fact, if I remember correctly, both NGUI and EasyGUI and some of the other UIs use Unity's default packer. Most of it is handled under the hood. I don't want to go into the details of it right now because we cover it in other places, but you can include an optional packing tag. So Unity will try to pack all of the sprites that have the same tag onto the same atlas or atlases based on the packing tag that you put on. And you can find out a little bit more about that by just going to now it opens in a different page. By going to the documentation on that one. Oops, packing tag. Oh, it's the whole thing. We get the we get all of sprites. Packing tag, yeah. The name of an optional sprite atlas into which the texture should be packed. And so when you want to be looking into for information, you want to be looking at sprite packing. And it was what makes atlases internally inside Unity. Erectus78. Will the new UI support bitmap fonts and text effects like gradient, outline, shadows, etc.? I was checking the UI text tutorial, but this is just normal fonts. Yeah, at this point, there is plans for additional support for more font effects. Currently, it just uses rich text that's supported in Unity and a few very basic effects like shadows. If we look at the text right now, you can see that we use rich text, so you can use the rich text formatting for emoticons and colors, as it says. And then you can add outline. We'll do the outline. Let me figure out where that is. Add component. Clear. But it's in here somewhere. There's outline and there's shadow. Problem is I always get to them by clicking on them, by selecting them that way. I don't remember where they filed them away. It's just kind of embarrassing. Oh, effects. I didn't realize there was another sub spot there. Silly me. There's another layer. Okay, well, there you go. Shadow, outline, and position as UV1. Thanks. But yes, there are some very basic, as you can see here, some very basic text effects, and they will get more as we get out of our beta stage. Gegabell, question, is there an easy way to store the position of a panel to be retrieved between game sessions? I mean, it is information that you need to save and you need to pass on to whatever the system is that you are saving. But if you take a look at the canvas that we have here and you look at the panel, you can see that we have a position and we have a height and width and we have anchor. So essentially you just need to know the rect transform information about that panel because that is the position of the panel compared to, let me come up to the scene. You know, you move the panel, and you've gotten more information here. So you've got the same height and width, but you've got a different position X, which is where it is relative to the pivot. You can see that it's 78 and 14. Let's move this a little bit more. And you can see these numbers here, when I highlight it, also show up on the UI. So you can see, as I've clicked on that, you can see we're 101.8 by 72.4 from my pivot point. Jalopesal? Hard to say. J-L-O-P-E-S-I-L. You've asked about screen space camera. I don't really have a good chance to be able to demo it now, but if you were to, we do cover that. The screen space canvas is covered under the in the tutorials under canvas, and it shows a reasonable representation of what you can do there. Essentially, it allows you to still be in overlay style mode, but give your UI perspective and interact with 3D objects. Apollyon 6K, in my dialogue system, I had dynamic text rects with the OnGUI system that resized the parent window. Is there something similar to that in the new UI? I am sorry if I missed it earlier. You can write a script that looks at the rect that you have and changes the value. That's the position. There's the width, so you could change the width at runtime. And then depending upon how you fixed your objects to it, you can see as I change the width here, note that the resume and quit, they are parented, they're anchored to the corners, so they're moving with it. We could look at the other material here, look at the sliders, and we could you know, now we can stretch in just one. So you should be able to set your individual items to be able to stretch or anchor the way you want to, and then just change the values of the rect transform at runtime. I don't want to say the next UI session I do, but in a future UI session, I want to talk about dragging and dropping, resizing windows, and dragging windows around, because I've created some very simple scripts where you can, in the game, just click and drag the window around. You can drag the lower corner and resize it. All of that standard functionality, and it's a very, very simple script. I don't really have time to go over it today, but I will be demoing that in another session. Drexschlauder91 already did a tutorial with a new UI system. Fantastic. With a tooltip in an inventory system. Ooh, you're making me jealous now. I haven't had time to work on some of my stuff. I guess this means that the tooltip is following the mouse till the mouse is not over the slot anymore. Yeah, and also you might, I'm not sure how you'd pass stuff. Like if you wanted something while you were over something, you could use that mouse, that hover or over event to then show something. All of these UI elements know hover, they know up and down, they know click. You know, so you should be able to take an element, put how would I do that? Out of curiosity. So this may be a little bit, forgive me if I get this completely wrong. Do we have hover on pointer enter? Buzz off. Okay. Public void test me now. Okay, put that on something. And then, where's our guy? Player icon. Test me now. Okay, so we've now created a very quick script, and something's going on. There we go. So we've got a graphic that detects me hovering over it. So I could imagine that that's the beginning of writing a script about tooltips as well. So I don't have a finished solution for you, but all of the elements in the UI can detect hovers, can detect enters and exits, can detect click downs. So you should be able to use those to be able to pop up tooltips. I'm sure that very soon we'll get a best practices how to do all of these things up, but I just don't have one for you right now. All right, I seem to have reached the end. Are there any last minute questions that people would like to ask? Otherwise, I might start wrapping up. Cool. All right. Well, let me put up some of the boilerplate that we have here from Unity. So follow us. Follow us at Unity3D. Follow us at Mike Geig. Follow us at Will Goldstone. And follow me at The Ant Ranch. And then also we may start seeing at Matt Shell, I believe, coming to visit us. When we do, we'll update the graphic. But for now, that's it, I guess. Thank you very much. And thank you all for coming. I'm going to go off mic. I'll stick around in the chat channel for a little bit and keep an eye on the live training site. I'm going to put some more UI videos up. Not sure when yet. Cool. All right. See you then.